And may I now request Ms. Rode Wanimbo of the Women's Department of the GIDI Church to kindly take it.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodian of Manta land, where I live and I speak at the moment. I also pay respect to the elders, past, present, and emerging. I would like also to acknowledge Dr. Fernand de Farenes, a special reporter on minority issues, and Tom Lantos Institute. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to greet you with my tribal language, Wa, Wa, Wa. West Papua is located in the western part of New Guinea Island. It lies in the Pacific region above the continent of Australia. Due to its natural wealth, West Papua has over the centuries been targeted by foreign occupiers. Until 1963, we were colonized by the Dutch. Indonesia invaded West Papua in 1963. Since that very year, West Papuan and the land of West Papua has been afflicted by conflict and violence that results in our suffering and prolonged human rights violation and natural destruction that continues to occur until today. In 1969, after a manipulative political act, we were transferred from the Dutch to Indonesia. West Papuan have been viewed as primitive and uncivilized by the previous oppressors and by the government of Indonesia. Due to the dominant culture, most of Indonesian government policies in West Papua are migrant biased, being designed for the benefits of the migrants instead of the local population. Papua Statistics Center stated in 2020 the population of indigenous West Papuan, it's about 2.3 million, while the total population is 4.3 million. The people and the nature of West Papua had been experiencing systemic racism, structural injustices, and violence as a result of colonialism. I identify 4 root causes of the conflict in West Papua. This is also based on my own experience and analysis. First, economic and political interest for natural resources exploitation. Political conspiracy driven by economic interest have led to the human rights violation of the right to self-determination of the West Papuan. The USA wanted the wealth of Mount Nemangkawi, so they conspire with the Indonesian government to obtain it. And they initiated the New York Agreement in 1962 to facilitate the transfer of power over West Papua from the Netherlands to Indonesia. In 1967, 2 years before the UN sanctioned process of determining West Papuans' political status, Freeport-McMoRan signed a business contract with the Indonesian government, begin with a mining extraction project. In 1967, instead of organizing a general referendum, the Indonesian government manipulated and intimidated the process of the Act of Free Choice. It went against the international democratic principle of one person, one vote. Unfortunately, the United Nations rubber stamped the process. Second, the use of a security approach. Military operations in West Papua have been taking place since 1963 to today. After a manipulative political act, protests were raised and held in various forms at many different places. To silence the protest and resistance, the Indonesian government sent security forces, which resulted in massive human rights violation in many other places. For example, in 1977, there was a mass killing in my village named Kelela. Approximately 150 people were buried alive. Many women experienced sexual violence. 2 of my aunts were raped by members of Indonesian army. In December 2018, there was an armed conflict between Indonesia's security forces and the West Papua National Liberation Army, named TPNPB, in Duga, in the highlands region of West Papua. This conflict caused the internal displacement of thousands of people, mainly women and children. They fled to the jungle and surrounding regions. Until today, the IDPs in Duga have been living in uncertainty for 3 years. Reverend Yeremias Sanambani was the 10th civilian victim shot dead in Intan Jaya, another highland region, in between October 2019 and December 2020. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the Indonesian government has forced its own citizens to leave their homes while they conduct military operations. I spent 6 days in Ilaga, Puncak region in July 2021, where people are living in a war zone. West Papua Council of Churches are concerned about Indonesia's security forces members continuing to use methods of warfare which do not distinguish civilians to the TPNPB during such operation. Method applies by security forces members include the use of firearms and explosives in the midst of indigenous civilians communities. More than 4,000 IDPs have been accommodated in the neighboring region and shelters, either by the churches or the relatives of IDPs. Third, racist mindset of the Indonesian government toward West Papuans. West Papua continue to be marginalized and stigmatized as separatist due to the racist mindset. For example, Victor Yemo, the international spokesperson of the National Committee of West Papua, who led the protest 2 years ago in Jayapura in response to racist slur against Papuan. He was arrested and put on trial in an Indonesian court in Jayapura. While people who expressed the racist slur didn't experience a deterrent effect in the eyes of the law. Fourth, consumption-based development, which is oriented to fulfill the capitalist interest. As a result, it diminishes the dignity of West Papuan and destroys the harmonious relationship and the interconnectedness with other creations. Papua province has the lowest life expectancy in Indonesia, the highest infant mortality, the highest with malaria and AIDS, population with the highest poverty rate in Indonesia. Prosperity approach, which has been implemented through special autonomy law in West Papua for 20 years, since 2001, is not improving the quality of lives of the indigenous West Papuans. This year, when Papuans People Assembly wanted to hold an evaluation towards the effectiveness of 20 years of the implementation of special autonomy law for West Papua, it was banned by security forces in cooperation with the central government. As minority group of people living and experiencing systemic racism and military operation, I would like to say that protection of human rights in West Papua is our urgent need. Through this forum, I would like to make the following recommendation. One, the Indonesian government should respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of West Papuan as a minority group. In the current context of conflict, the West Papuan have lost their sense of security in their own land. The access to education, health services, and other basic needs of those who are displaced during the conflict in West Papua have also been continuously denied. Two, the Indonesian government should provide humanitarian access to the United Nations and the international community to address the humanitarian crisis in the region of West Papua affected by the conflict. 3, the Indonesian government should create a democratic space to meet the leaders of United Liberation Movement for West Papua, ULMWP, to find a solution to more than 50 years of violent political conflict. This should be a sustainable solution to the conflict that can be accepted by all parties involved in the conflict, in particular the West Papuans. 4, the Indonesian government should stop using the security approach in West Papua and stop giving impunity to the members of Indonesian army and police who are involved in human rights violation. 5, the Indonesian government should withdraw its security forces from West Papua. The Indonesian security forces have been involved in the extractive industry, committed intimidation, killing, and other forms of human rights violation, including silencing democratic freedom and freedom of expression. 6, the United Nations to ensure the perpetrators of human rights violation affiliated with Indonesia's security forces are held accountable in transparent and fair trials. The last recommendation, the Indonesian government should ensure the meaningful participation of West Papuan representatives in the policy-making process as part of the right to self-determination. This should include policy in the use of natural resources in West Papua. Thank you very much for your attention. Wah, wah, wah.